it looks like the world has gone mad, and it's only going to get madder from here. And that is definitely a representation of what just happened in Pittsburgh with a horrible event where 11 people were killed inside of a synagogue by a madman who even tweeted, quote, "Screw your optics, I'm going in on Twitter," before committing this heinous act. This person, of course, we will not bring up this person's name or show you the image of who he is for a very specific reason, which we're going to get into later on. But it looks like from this horrible atrocity that happened, that the mainstream media is more concerned about Gab, a social media platform that is supposed to be an alternative to Twitter and supposed to be an access to the people who are being banned on Twitter for their political speech. And it looks like the mainstream media is solely concentrating on Gab, this platform that this insane person was on and was spewing his hateful rhetoric. And to me, what the media is doing here is taking advantage of this. But if you look at their coverage of this, with them showing the name of this lunatic, of showing his face, they're ultimately, I believe, encouraging political warfare. And right now, we're at a state where American politics is so dirty and skeevy. It is just filled with emotional, hyperbolic morons who are just screaming at the top of their lungs for retweets. And it's even difficult to sift through and rationalize what is happening and have a greater context to the news, because everyone is trying to get power from events like we have seen unfolded in Pittsburgh, but also with the MAGA bomber. And we have seen a crazy man who was sending out bombs that didn't work, bomb replicas, and he ultimately was successfully taught how to dominate the 24/7 mainstream news cycle for days. And this is something that needs to be brought up because, again, his face, his van, his activities was brought up by the mainstream media very heavily, concentrating on that very specific issue. And if you look at psychological studies, if you look at what therapists have to say on this specific issue, they talk and mention how the mainstream media's coverage inspires copycats. This is why even major sports leagues, whether it's the NBA, the NFL, tennis, whatever it is, when they're broadcasting sports, they have a specific policy that says if a crazy person runs on the field with a political sign, or not even a political sign, with any sign, or with anything painted on them to promote anything, disrupting the sports match, that they do not put that person on camera and broadcast them out to the larger public, because it creates copycats. There's many psychological research papers out there that proves that a lot of the mainstream media coverage is creating copycats of these incidences. And this is one of the reasons why we are not bringing up this lunatic's name in Pittsburgh who committed this heinous act not so long ago. And because of that, the mainstream media here really needs to be held more accountable than anything else, because this will lead down to a very devastating path. And it's not only that sinister thing that they're doing, knowingly or even not knowingly, but also they're taking advantage of these situations, whether it's the MAGA bomber or the Pittsburgh lunatic, and they're calling for, of course, more censorship. We even saw on Fox News with Oliver Darcy of CNN going after them because Lou Dobbs criticized George Soros before. And now Fox News is even releasing official statements saying that they're taking down Lou Dobbs's videos about George Soros down because he was one of the people who has sent these replica bombs that didn't work and created this huge media controversy. So again, they're using a lot of emotional, hyperbolic talk to promote their bigger agenda, which of course is censoring any kind of free speech. And this is only being exaggerated as we're seeing Gab, the social media network that this lunatic was on, lose their hosting provider and also be permanently banned from Stripe and PayPal. Meanwhile, this person was also on Twitter, he was on Facebook, and those social media outlets are not getting the same amount of critique as, of course, Gab is right now, because Gab, of course, is a target for them, which they want to take down. Now, Gab is a social media platform that allows free speech, and obviously people are taking full advantage of that, and they're saying a lot of crazy things, and that does need to be acknowledged. But we have to understand here, This is one crazy lunatic who is ruining something for millions of people because the mainstream media is becoming opportunistic corporatists who are going to be exploiting this event. Meanwhile, they do not give a damn about the people who are hurt, the people who are killed, the people who are maimed, the people who are injured. They are only interested in power, which is a bigger lesson that needs to be broadcasted out there, because these special interests, they don't give a damn about human life, and they selectively choose what they are outraged about. This lunatic, again, tweeted right before he committed this heinous act. And Twitter, instead of going after crazy lunatics, which are documented well on social media, they're too busy tracking people who are posting NPC memes, which they've been working diligently on trying to censor, instead of the actual threats and incitements of violence that we have seen portrayed by other people. So this shows you the priorities that the big social tech monopolies have, who of course work in collusion with the mainstream media in many different ways, and also with their special interests and also with the government. We also saw this week Ford Fisher, who was broadcasting the Walk Away March, have his broadcast censored because it matched some of the music that was in the background. But Facebook even said that they banned his video in over, how many countries was it here that I'm looking at here? Let me get the exact numbers here. 248 countries. Facebook said that they banned his video from 248 countries. Meanwhile, there's only 195 countries in the world. So again, just utterly ridiculous. And it's not just Ford Fisher, it's not just Gab, it's not just any, just anybody getting censored. It's anyone going against the establishment, like we saw with Paul Craig Roberts. And I disagree with some of the things that Paul Craig Roberts says, but he was also just banned from Twitter. And this shows you how they're trying to take advantage of the situation, because these big tech monopolies, these big mass media companies, they don't care about the truth. They care about power, and they're galvanizing these situations to justify their moves for more power and less people questioning them. And that's why they are selecting what they're outraged about. And really, the distinctions that have to be made here are not between Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives. It's really either if you're a person who favors war and violence to gain power or value for someone else, or you are a human being who values culture, humanity, and human rights. It's really that simple. That should be the context that people should understand where people are coming from, because a lot of this stuff is just fake outrage. Because if people really cared about human life, if they cared about individuals in this planet that were affected, they would care about the people that are being killed and murdered in Yemen right now, with some experts saying that the death toll in Yemen is actually 5 times higher than what is currently being reported. And of course, criticism of Saudi Arabia was prevalent couple days ago, but it's completely gone from the mainstream media dialectics that are and conversations that are happening right now. We even had this week Rand Paul come out publicly and says, "Why do we have worldwide terrorism?" And he said, quote, "The Saudis fund it." He even said during a big event that he had with Trump Jr., quote, "Anyone remember who attacked us on 9/11?" Being, of course, very critical of Saudi Arabia, because it is the Saudi-U.S. coalition that is committing these atrocities in Yemen and destroying human life. There's an interesting article also in the New York Times, and we have to be fair here, because sometimes the mainstream media does a good job, sometimes they don't. But in this instant, I saw really great work with a New York Times journalist who actually spent 2 weeks in the mountains of Yemen documenting just the heartbreaking crisis that is happening in Yemen, with the famine, with the war, and the worst humanitarian crisis that the world is going through. And I actually really liked this article. And then the New York Times reported how people who were sharing this article on Twitter were having their posts removed by Facebook. Only because of a public outcry did Facebook stop banning a New York Times article talking about the mass human casualties that were happening in that country, which shows you who they're really in favor of. Even this week, Facebook shut down 652 Iranian-backed accounts, which they said was, quote, linked to a global disinformation campaign. But this really just shows you their select outrage and the big tech monopolies pretty much interconnected with the military-industrial complex, pushing for an agenda, trying to get more power for themselves. And it all kind of comes together with even one of a prominent promoter of women's rights in Saudi Arabia coming out recently saying that she is quitting social media because she doesn't even feel safe on these platforms, and she has every reason to. As we know, Saudi Arabia has put in billions of dollars into tech companies in the United States, and of course, those billions of dollars are not just going there for any reason. They're going there for, of course, influence and control, and that's why we're seeing anyone who goes against Saudi Arabia, whether it's Iran, whether it's even the Syrian state television that was on YouTube that was also censored a couple weeks ago, being totally obliterated. It even came out just a few days ago that Saudi Arabia had a spy inside of Twitter that was spying on people who were critical of the Saudi regime, sending over their private information right to the Saudi government, right from Twitter's back door. So this person that just came out has every reason and right to feel afraid to be on social media when she's calling for human rights. And this is a story that you think would be galvanized. You think people would be talking about it, but no. And there's even more news with the Khashoggi case, the journalist that was assassinated in the Saudi consulate in Turkey. And it even just came out that this journalist was about to disclose details of Saudi Arabia's use of chemical weapons in Yemen. This is according to a source to the London Express newspaper. And according to other sources, they are also reporting that British intelligence actually knew that the Saudis were going to assassinate him 3 weeks before he even entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Major news that needs to be highlighted and people need to understand, because ultimately what we're seeing here is the selective outrage for, of course, more power and more censorship, and anyone going against the system is going to be cut down, just like we're seeing everyone being cut down who dare speaks about the power system and the power grid that is out there. And that's why we even saw a big neocon come out and say that the censorship of alternative media is just the beginning. And this, of course, was a statement made by Jamie Fly, who at a Berlin security conference made this statement saying that he was also a part and taking credit for the coordinated purge of alternative media. So it's only going to get worse from here.